coming at ya, at ya. Tell you what's master, coming at ya, coming at ya. Rhyme style disaster, coming at ya, at ya. Tell you what's master, coming at ya.
And with that beat, hello and welcome to In Focus. I am Rom Gayoso, your host. There are many ways to see into the future, and today we're lucky enough to welcome not one but two top-notch futurists who will help us make sense of different futures paradigms, so stay tuned. This episode is a bit different from the norm. We'll first introduce each one of the participants, say a few words about their work, and then greet them. Dr. William Halal and Dr. Michael Marion will start out with a 10-minute presentation where they present their perspectives, explain methods, and cover some of the most well-known sources in their field. After we had the opportunity to explore each point of view, then we will welcome questions from the audience, so don't be shy. And today, I'm also joined by Victor Mori from WFSF. How are you doing today, Victor?
Good morning, everybody. Good evening to people outside of the US, and I'm very much honored to join you and Professor Halal and Professor Marion. And I'm looking very much forward to this engaging debate and hopefully these contrasting viewpoints about the futures of humanity and the global perspective is going to be quite exciting and opportunity for learning for many of our audience. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's get going. And I just want to say a few words about the show. So this show is a result of a partnership between WFSF and yours truly, Futures Television. We're joining forces to advance sharing of information and knowledge of futures topics. Our focus is on future studies, foresight, and on futures methodologies. What should you expect? Well, you'll gain direct access to knowledge and information produced by the top minds in this field. WFSF is a UNESCO and UN consultative partner and a truly global NGO with members in over 60 countries. Today, we have two top researchers who will be discussing a very current topic. So what should you expect to gain from this show? Well, today we meet two researchers who have invested their careers to help us make sense of the future. We will understand their methods and use this time together to question reality around us. If you're curious about what's happening, what may happen, and what ought to happen, then stay tuned. We have the right people for you to meet today. But before I welcome our guests, please don't be shy. The chat windows are open, so feel free to say hi. So let me say a few words about our guests today. Professor Dr. Michael Marion is the author of Societal Direction and Alternatives, a critical guide to the literature. He is the founder and editor of Future Survey, a monthly publication that from 1979 until 2008 brought in excess of 20,000 abstracts on a variety of futures topics. He is a senior principal at securesustain.org, publisher of the Security and Sustainability Guide. He is also the research director for Existential Risks to Humanity Working Group, and he has a lot to share in this field. So let me say a few words about Dr. Bill Halal. Professor Bill Halal is a professor emeritus of management, technology, and innovation at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He specializes in emerging technologies, strategic planning, and institutional change. He is also the author of Beyond Knowledge, How Technology is Driving an Age of Consciousness. We have a separate interview on that book, so please visit wfsf.org for that show. Well, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Michael Marion and Dr. Bill Halal to the show. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, Mike. I'm looking for my slide I want to present. Just give me a minute here.
Absolutely. So, folks, again, this show is going to be slightly different than the norm. So I'm joined today by Victor Modi from WFSF And then what's going to happen is we're going to have each one of the professors, Dr. Marion is going to make a brief presentation, about 10 minutes. And then it's going to be followed by Dr. Bill Halal, who's going to talk for about 10 minutes. They're going to show you two different paradigms, two different perspectives, two different views of the world. Then we're going to have an exchange. So after we had the opportunity to explore the topics in the two different perspectives, we're going to open the camera for comments and questions. So don't be shy. Feel free to share some of your points of view. Of course, we already have some of our friends saying hi to you. Michael Sales, looking forward to a strong debate between two great minds and futurists. We're joined by Rosa Alegria. Hello, Rosa, from São Paulo, Brazil. Yet another fantastic futurist. Love the work Rosa Alegria does. And of course, we're privileged to have other friends with us. Jose Luis Cordeiro. Greetings. He's in Madrid, Spain today. He's usually traveling, but now he is in Madrid. And of course, we have Oliver Markley here. He can't hear you guys for some reason, so let's make sure everything's okay. So I guess, Dr. Marion, would you like to go first?
I prefer that Bill goes first.
No, I think Mike, you should go first. I think.
You think I should go first?
Yes, I think it just.
Okay. All right. Tell me when my 10 minutes are up. First, I want to thank Bill for initiating this update to our original debate in the Journal of Future Studies in December of 2011. I think that the idea originated when we last met in person in Singapore in 2010. Is that right, Bill?
Yes, something like that.
Yeah. And the 2011 debate was quite extensive, and we had about 10 responses in print. And the bottom line, Bill's concluding headline was, "The world is entering an advanced stage of evolution." My concluding headline was, "Infoglut, ignorance, indecision, and inadequacy." That headline still works for me, and I think that Bill's probably still works for him, and that's our differences. Bill and I agreed to 4 scenarios, and we quantified the likelihood for a quick summation and overview. The scenarios are decline to disaster, muddling down, which I call improvement, but growing inadequacy nevertheless, muddling up, and rise to maturity. For disaster, Bill was 10%, I was 20%. For muddling down, Bill was 25%, I was 60%. For muddling up, Bill was 60%, I was 20%. And for rise to maturity, Bill was 5%, and I was 0%. Since 2011, I think that muddling down proved most accurate due to Trump and Trumpism, COVID-19, Putin's folly in Ukraine, migrant crises and climate events, heat, floods, storms, droughts, wildfires, especially in this year, and well beyond expectations of even the experts. My current estimates for the next decade are 30% disaster, especially if Trump is reelected. The US and China clash over Taiwan, AI runs amok before effective controls are in, or climate tipping points become widely obvious. Any of these could lead to disaster. There's high uncertainty right now, obviously. I say 60% further muddling down and 10% betterment, muddling up, but that's to be generous. Also 0% for rise to maturity of consciousness. Thus, overview, I'm 30-60-10-0, and I had been 20-60-20-0, so it's roughly the same with more emphasis on disaster. I await Bill's view on that. Bill is still optimistic. He calls me a pessimist. I view myself as a realist, and Bill as an arguably impractical idealist. I will briefly explain how I came by my position as a futures bibliographer and critic. I don't consider myself a futurist, but I'm seen as such. And that's usually the definition of a futurist, is someone who either says they're a futurist or is seen as that. It's usually, except for the professional futurists, there's no qualifications. First, I'd like to mention I have three commonalities with Bill. First, we're both getting old. I'm 5 years older than Joe Biden, and this is a major issue right now as to whether he should run again for president simply because he's 80 years old. This raises some questions. Supposedly, when you're older, you're wiser. At least traditionally, this is so. So it's wisdom versus senility or physical problems, and I leave that to the younger people to decide that. Secondly, it's just a coincidence, but Bill and I have a shared residence in the northwest corner of Washington. That's where I grew up. Bill lived in Vauxhall for a while, and now I believe he's living somewhere between Loftville Road and MacArthur Boulevard. And I grew up near the streetcar, what had been the streetcar tracks, just parallels MacArthur Boulevard. But that's just a coincidence. Take it for what it is. The more important similarity, we both have MBAs from the University of California at Berkeley, or Berkeley, as a friend of mine called it. But from there, we diverged. Bill went on to get a PhD from UC Berkeley in business. I went to Syracuse University to get a PhD in social science so I could learn about what's happening. While I was at SU, I very fortunately met Bertram Gross, who was a leader in social indicators and systems thinking in the late 1960s. He later served as president of the Society for General Systems Research in 1970. In 1968, after I finished my coursework, I became a research associate at the Educational Policy Research Center at Syracuse while writing my dissertation on a macro systems view of education, which was encouraged by Gross and would have never gotten approved of if it had not been Bert Gross, as well as the 1960s. In 1969, I was at EPRC. OECD asked us for an overview of futures literature, which was burgeoning at that time. I was assigned the task, and I quickly became the world expert for lack of any other competitor other than Eleonora Massini in Europe. Annotated bibliography became a way for me to learn what's happening, and ever since I've been doing it in one form or another, along with the related concerns of what may happen and what ought to happen. Now, in 1976, I published Societal Directions and Alternatives. It's 400 pages, 917 critical abstracts, 9 indexes, including an index to 63 evolutionary stage theories and 206 titles for preferred alternative societies. There's a lot was going on at that time. Now, Bill's recent book, Beyond Knowledge, is a sophisticated stage theory with a chart showing evolution from the agrarian age to industrial age, service age, knowledge age, and consciousness age, with a unified world, global ethics, planet Earth is sacred, democratic enterprise, a mental spiritual revolution, and much more on this very attractive book cover. But it has been said in many ways, which is summarized in my Societal Directions and Alternatives. Just a moment. Here it is right here in case anyone has ever has an occasion to see it. Chapter 4, called the Cosmic Evolutionary View, in which I had 17 pages with 42 items, including Alfred Korzybski's book, The Manhood of Humanity, published in 1921, in which he said, humanity is now coming to its senses. Sri Aurobindo, several items on the advent of the spiritual age. Teilhard de Chardin had several items on the noosphere, the thinking sphere superimposed on the biosphere. There was a very interesting New York Times op-ed in 1973 by Gopi Krishna on evolving consciousness to higher states of consciousness. And Willis Harman wrote about the New Copernican Revolution in 1969. Harman was the head of the other EPRC at Stanford at that time. Both EPRCs were funded by Office of Education on Great Society money and just lasted a few years until Nixonism took over. Dwayne Elgin, who worked with Willis Harman, wrote about the Third American Frontier, the Evolution of Consciousness and Transformation of Society in 1975. And then the best known of all of these was Charles Wright, The Greening of America in 1970, which was I think it was a bestseller. We talked about transition from consciousness 2 to consciousness 3 for, quote, continued survival of man as a species in an age of technology. And there's many more. Put in context, this is part of what I call the great futures vogue of the late 1960s and 1970s, and I really wish somebody would write a book about this remarkable period. So what do we make of Bill's book? Well, either it's a throwback to this earlier time some 50 years ago and more of failed and forgotten cosmic idealism, or we can argue that the ideas on the evolution of consciousness have finally arrived and are relevant today, and Bill is our leader. My position is that there's very little or no evidence that this transition is underway. Arguably, we live in a world of infoglut and ignorance, a world of ever-growing fragmentation, a world of know-nothing unconsciousness, exemplified by Donald Trump. Halal calls him a master at shaping consciousness, but it's a backward kind of consciousness of make America great again. Stress the again in the MAGA slogan. Putin, too, seeks to regain past glories by annexing Ukraine, by destroying it if he has to, and pulling down Russia at the same time. But so if we convince ourselves that a transition is underway, we ignore other pathways of more practical idealism, such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals and promoting human security, and my proposed Agenda 2040 to replace the Agenda 2030 behind the SDGs. And this should be motivated by growing attention to the threats, the growing threats of existential risks. Halal does mention existential risk in passing, but only climate change, pandemics, and growing inequality. But there's much more to consider. See, for example, a very thorough Center for the Study of Existential Risk volumes in the Age of Global Risk, which are coming out very, very soon. CSER is at the University of Cambridge. Okay, finally, insofar as artificial intelligence, Bill's June 6th newsletter on the promises and perils of AI illustrate his biases. Do I have a couple more minutes to go over this now, or should you try to do it later?
Yeah, feel free. Just wrap it up, and then we'll change.
Can I continue? Okay.
Yeah, just wrap it up. Yeah.
I'm going to quote from Bill, because this is important. This shows his bias very clearly. Quote, the results lead us to conclude that AI is a powerful tool, but the bold claims and deep fears over a purported singularity may be overblown. I agree with that, although I think that May is rather generous. This study, based on 28 respondents, is limited. I'm quoting Bill, but we find no evidence to support the prospect for an artificial general intelligence that is superior to humans. That is true at the moment, but it's coming soon, perhaps sooner than Bill expects, and I refer you to the writings of Jerry Glenn on this. He was deeply concerned and makes a strong case for it. He says there's no evidence of mass unemployment, and that's much too soon to say. It depends also on how you define mass. And finally, no evidence of the existential threats commonly professed to be all but certain, and that's an overstatement. It's not commonly professed, and it's not terribly common yet, and it's not certain, but there's growing probability of that. The data, quoting Bill again, the data clearly suggests that AI will become far more powerful, yes, yet subject to humanity's unique powers of higher consciousness. That is questionable. Another quote from Bill. While strong regulation is essential, we foresee moderate and possibly even strong capability to control AI. That is, I'd just say, optimistic. Quoting Bill again, TechCast suggests that a superintelligent AI that surpasses human agency is not possible. That, to me, is very optimistic. Finally, quoting Bill, the data suggests substantial gains in social stability and prosperity, highly questionable, as well as comparable advances in human intelligence and creativity. And this sounds about 2 clicks short of Ray Kurzweil's singularity. Insofar as AI governance, the 2023 Global AI Infrastructure Report is published by George Mason University and the Stimson Center in August, 47 pages, analyzes 54 national plans and differences in quote-unquote AI wardrobes, which is a variable mix of similar elements. The cluster of countries have similar strategies in the EU, Latin America, and East Asia. Well, this is very interesting. However, they make no mention of the global standards and how standards will be enforced. And I strongly recommend, in contrast, Ian Bremmer and Mustafa Suleiman in Foreign Affairs, The Current Issues, September-October, pages 26-43, who argue that global AI governance is needed and regulatory efforts to date are, quote, in their infancy and still inadequate. AI models will be everywhere, and it takes just one malign model to wreak havoc. So I will sign off from here and see what Bill has to say. Thank you very much.
Obviously, thank you so much. But before we get there, several friends are saying hi. Today actually is a very international show. Hello, Fernando Ortega. He is following us from Lima, Peru. We have another wonderful futurist with us, Gerd Leonhard in Switzerland. He is the author of The Good Future and other wonderful films. Watch his films. They are truly inspirational. Gerd, wonderful to have you here today. We have Deb Dietz, the star of STEB About Business. The show also runs here on Futures Television. Welcome, Deb. And then we have Steve. Steve Lichty is in Nairobi, Kenya. So very, very wonderful and global audience today with us for this exchange. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Bill Halal, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Romulo, how do I show my PowerPoint? One slide I want to show.
You go present.
Pardon me?
And there's the one that says present.
Present. Oh, okay. Present.
Yep.
And then slides. And how do I get slides?
From C drive, I guess it's in your C.
Yeah, no slides. Yeah, I need help here. And now I go to slides. Right. But I need help.
Let's see. Can you
share screen? Share screen? Okay, share screen.
Yeah, share screen. That would work.
And now how do I get? Oh, for God's sakes.
I usually go present, share screen, or present.
Yeah, and then I've got a window here that says select a tab to share. What does that mean?
Just go to the tab and click on the tab you would like to share.
I'm sorry, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so when the lower one, when you are in present, and then it says present what?
I've got a window here that says choose what to share. With
just highlight the one you want to share.
I don't see anything here to share. I'm sorry. I need help.
Yeah, and then you try sharing from slides. So if not, why don't you just email me the slides and you can get started and have your presentation.
I'm going to send you the slide right now.
Okay.
Okay, it's going to you.
Okay, so please go ahead, get started, and
Okay.
as soon as I get it, we'll share.
Good. Okay. First of all, I fully agree with Michael that the threats are enormous. There's no question about that. I thank him for his wonderful scholarship in documenting these threats that he calls a polycrisis. That's great. I think of it as a crisis of global maturity because what I'm going to show is that I think the world is on the verge of achieving a global maturity based on my work studying the life cycle of evolution. And as soon as I get my video, I will explain that to you. I've spent a lot of work over many years, decades really, trying to figure out this life cycle of evolution, which charts the entire rise of civilization accurately with real scales and real data points, as opposed to just a simple sketch that you see often. And it's very compelling. Romulo, do you have the slide yet? Let me start talking about it until Romulo gets it up. This is a science-based model of social evolution. It uses historic data, and I'll describe the axes. It's important to understand what it does. The horizontal scale uses a logarithmic scale in order to illustrate the trend of the life cycle. If you use an ordinary scale, you wouldn't see anything. It would just make a right turn upward. But on a logarithmic scale, the present years expand and you can see what happens. The vertical scale is a simple ordinal scale that indicates the stages of evolution, one after another, 7 stages. I'm waiting for my slide. Well, let me just go on and say more about this while I can. The thing that's remarkable about when you see this graph, I think you'll be impressed, that when I first plotted this many years ago, I was amazed to see that it makes a perfect S-curve. It's perfect. Usually when you plot data in any scientific field, you see scatter among the data. There's no scatter here. The data points fit perfectly. It's a perfect S-curve, and S-curves are characteristic of all life forms. Here it is. Can you make that bigger, please?
Cannot.
That's as big as we can get it?
Yes. It's from the email, yeah.
Oh, wow, okay. So you can see the horizontal scale, logarithmic scale, and the ordinal scale goes through the 7 stages of evolution. It's a perfect S-curve. S-curves are a characteristic of all life forms. The growth of bacteria in a dish would follow an S-curve. The growth of a human being follows an S-curve. This is an S-curve plotting the life cycle of civilization on this planet. It's precise. It's a science-based model. Let me make a comment, 2 points. The beginning of the information age or the knowledge age, which I have here as the year 2000, I forecast that at least 10 years in advance. In publications, you can find my forecast. And when I will tell people, I think we're going to be using personal computers, their typical response was, why would anybody want a personal computer? That was when computers filled rooms, if you remember. And that shows how difficult it is to imagine these big changes in evolution to a new stage. It's almost impossible to understand. And that's where we are now with the onset of an age of consciousness. It's a very difficult thing to grasp. I'm going to do my best to make it clear. And I estimate it started about 2020 What happened in the year 2020 that gives us a sense of why I would call that the start? What do you think happened? The insurrection on the Capitol. That was the first time in history in which half of the country believed in a big lie. That's consciousness. It's not good consciousness, but it's consciousness. When people disregard the truth and believe in a false lie, it's a massive indicator of consciousness. And that's been going on for years, of course, but that, I think, was the beginning of that period. And that's been made possible, of course, by the flood of social media and artificial intelligence, which is automating knowledge and flooding us with overwhelming amounts of information. And so people have to make a choice, and they choose what they choose to believe. And so we're getting all of this crazy post-factual behavior. People believe whatever they want. That's consciousness. It's not good consciousness, but it's consciousness. It's also indicated by the trend in the life cycle of evolution graph. The industrial age lasted 100 years. The next stage, the service age, lasted 50 years. If you project that trend 100 years, 50 years, you would expect something like 20 or 30 years till the next stage. That's exactly when I think it happened, the year 2020. So I feel pretty confident about this. I think we are living now in an era beyond knowledge, where people choose to believe what they want to believe, and the consciousness is not goodness. Consciousness includes everything. It's a huge domain. It's like the fourth element of the universe: matter, energy, and information, and consciousness. So it includes everything, good, bad, or otherwise, and to change the consciousness into something that will resolve these terrible threats that Mike points out. And that's what I think the life cycle of evolution suggests. Every life cycle matures. It concludes with a state of maturity. And I think we're heading towards a state of maturity right now. The crisis of global maturity is our challenge to solve these problems and to reach a sustainable state of maturity. It's very much like what a human being goes through in the life cycle of a human being, the crisis of human maturity. Teenagers struggle to achieve adulthood, and they get into a lot of trouble until the pain gets so severe that they have no choice, but they shape up and they become responsible and they become adults. That's roughly where the world is now. We are experiencing the pain of these crises that Mike points out. And the question is, how much pain are we going to endure before we make the necessary changes? And so let me give you a sense of the vision of where I think this is going to go. You need a vision. Nothing happens without a vision. In the business world, you need a vision to launch a new product. And so the vision I want to suggest is a global consciousness, which is widespread in the literature and in public discourse. People are talking about global consciousness. It's a very simple idea, although many people have suggested lots of different ways of talking about global consciousness. It's a very simple idea. It basically is to recognize the interdependence of all life on the planet, and that could suggest that we need to cooperate. Very simple idea. Cooperation is the most underutilized form of action today. If we could learn to cooperate, all these problems could be solved in due course, and everybody would benefit. Everybody. And it's also really being forced upon us by the crises, the polycrisis that Mike points out. These are global crises. You can't solve a global crisis with a local solution. You need a global solution. And so we're being forced to cooperate to solve these global crises. That's really just about most of what I had in mind. But let me now offer the forecast that is indicated here. using the TechCast method with, I think we had 30 participants, we estimate the a global consciousness is likely to emerge about 2030, plus or minus about 5 years, with a low probability, 55% probability, which indicates how much uncertainty there is, how fearful people are. So this is not a slam dunk. I fully admit that we could not make it. We could fail. But I think it's more likely that we will succeed because these attitudes are changing. And in fact, attitudes could flip as the pain of climate change, for instance, escalates. In the next few years, attitudes could flip. Al Gore has been noted as saying he thinks we're reaching a tipping point on climate. So I think the bottom line is I think a solution is possible. It's indicated by the life cycle of evolution here. But to actually have a solution, have change requires faith. If we continue to believe in doom and gloom, nothing's going to change. So we have to have faith in something. And I think we should have faith in the life cycle of evolution, the forces of evolution. They are the things that are driving this. And I'll conclude by making this one point. Civilization has been through enormous throughout history. The same forces that drove us to overcome the fall of Rome, the Dark Ages, the Black Death, World Wars I and II, and the Cold War bristling with nuclear weapons, those same forces, whatever they were, I think are likely to help us overcome the crisis that Mike and I are talking about here. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your attention. Now we're looking forward to getting an open discussion, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. So a few other friends are saying hi to you. So we have Luke. Luke is in Singapore. Wonderful to have seen you at APFN 9 in Kuala Lumpur a few days ago. Thank you so much. And we have Samista saying hi to you guys from South Africa. Thank you, Samista, for joining us today. We do have a few comments here. So let's share some of them here. So we do have a few comments and a few questions starting here with Alex. So this argument that it is naive to expect the world to get better can be countered by pointing out that it's by far more naive to expect too many survivors in case of a failure to do so. So some kind of a thermonuclear resource war coming by. Yeah, so I guess, of course, we have two different points. But what's interesting for us to note, folks, is that if we cannot imagine, we cannot make it happen. And that's actually the beautiful side of the work that both professors do here, is that helping us imagine different potential futures. And that's what we're doing here today, talking about this Imagineering. And folks, if you like the future, work very hard to achieve it. And if you don't like what you see into the future, work harder to prevent it. So thank you. So let's go into the exchange. So feel free to share a few of your thoughts. Victor, would you like to share a few?
Well, thank you very much for this exciting discussion. And I'm, in a sense, not supposed to take the sides of either Dr. Halal or Dr. Marion, but let me just briefly point to a couple of possible issues with these arguments coming from both sides. Professor Halal is saying that his framework, the evolutionary life cycles, is based on data and forecasting the different stages or ages of different types. But I'm interested to know why we should not consider so many data series that are showing us exactly to the direction that Professor Marion is talking about. For example, based on our monitoring of these trends, we can say that, for example, Europe is the fastest growing in terms of warming of the planet, or the ocean heat temperature is off the charts. Half of the glaciers are disappearing, and the sea level rise is posing a lot of security risks. Insect population is declining. Fertility among men is also dropping. You see, there are very strong signals and trends in the monitoring by futurists that is clearly pointing towards some very negative picture for the planetary situation or condition. And on the other hand, I am been following Professor Marion for many years, and I have seen that he is emphasizing that uh, uh, generally we should not trust the expertise of people who call themselves futurists. Rather, we should look at the resources that are provided by the experts themselves. And one of my questions from Dr. Marion is that if that is the case, why we should not listen, for example, to the International Union of Geological Sciences? Because as long as I know, as far as I know, they have not yet recognized this term Anthropocene. And although many people involved in the sustainability community and environmentalist futurists are pretty much focused on promoting this Anthropocene as a key assumptions in their scenarios about the future of the planet, because you are signing a very exaggerated role for the humans in the pollution of the environment or degradation of the environment. This is two of my key questions from both sides of this debate, and I would appreciate that our speakers actually provide good answers to this.
And also, we do have a definitional question before we get there, because I think it's important for us to kind of set the grounds if they were not clear. So Samish is asking, can you, she's curious to know what consciousness means for either of you, because you're talking about achieving planetary consciousness. What do you mean by consciousness? So let's kind of set up the working grounds, and then we can get into the specifics, please.
Can I respond to that? Yeah,
Please.
you can find lots of very complex definitions. Some people think it's Jungian consciousness, the ever-present symbols and myths that exist in the universe that we draw on. I think of consciousness in very practical terms: the content of the mind, the state of the mind. There are two different forms of consciousness. I think this is well understood and accepted. Objective consciousness, which deals with knowledge, basically knowledge and making decisions, data, that's kind of thing. That's what computers are good at. There is also subjective consciousness, which is more powerful. The values, beliefs, emotions that people hold, free will, that is more powerful. That's what I think of as higher consciousness. That's what we're entering now. That's why we see all of this madness around us, because we see all kinds of subjective consciousness, people believing just about what they want. And the challenge is to unify those different beliefs into a coherent global consciousness that will resolve these threats. I want to speak briefly to Victor's points. Yes, the challenges are enormous. The dangers are mounting, but a change in consciousness to a global consciousness is what's needed to get through those dangers. The present consciousness, which focuses on self-interest, money, and power, is not going to get us there. That's the problem. We need a different consciousness that, in addition, those things are real, of course. People will always be interested in their self-interest, but we have to augment that with cooperation. Very powerful. Collaboration is the key to solving these dilemmas. We need a global consciousness that allows people around the world to work together to solve those problems, not with big government, but just collaboration on the tough problems of our time.
Another definitional question here. So Rosa Alegria from São Paulo, Brazil. So she's asking, when you talk about consciousness, do you conceive that consciousness involves wisdom? So consciousness and wisdom as a positive aspect of it.
Oh, of course.
I miss this concept of wisdom as an evolution of knowledge. I want to hear from you about it, how you define consciousness and wisdom.
Yes, wisdom, consciousness is huge. It's a domain. It's a vast domain. It's like information. And includes infinite variety of things. Wisdom would be a part of it, of course. Vision is a part of consciousness. Intuition. There are innumerable aspects to consciousness, and we simply don't understand it. It's a new frontier, and we are now being forced to begin to understand consciousness and to shape it so that it's practical, so that we can not be victimized by events and choose the kind of future we want. We have to shape consciousness. That begins by having a vision and believing in it. Otherwise, nothing changes.
Dr. Marion?
Yeah. I don't use consciousness in among the terms that I employ. It's too broad and sometimes fuzzy. It makes me think. When I started out, before I went to Berkeley, I worked for a New York ad agency for a couple of years. I have a background in advertising, and for better or worse. And if you have an important product, you try to sell it. And I think that Bill is just assuming that consciousness happens. I mean, this is an underlying sense that I get from everything he says, that somehow it just will happen. You don't have to do anything to promote it. And my position is that you absolutely have to promote it. But how do you promote it? Now, let's get into the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. That I think Bill just mentions it very fleetingly in passing. And in the US, they're scarcely known. I read the New York Times, I read The Economist, they never mentioned the SDGs. It's quite a mouthful because there's 17 goals, but nevertheless, it's a package. It needs to be promoted, and the UN has not promoted it. Another problem with the failing of SDGs, and in addition to the major global shocks we have had, is that the Security and Sustainability Guide that I'm part of, that I set up, we tried to look at all the organizations involved in dealing with some aspect of security or sustainability. And we have more than 2,000 of them, and they're all over the place, and very few of them mention the UN's SDGs. And this is a huge question, but at least one hypothesis I have as to why they aren't mentioned is because the UN doesn't mention these other organizations. And the UN is always talking about cooperation and partnerships. That's their SDG number 17. But they're just talking about cooperation among nations, which obviously is deteriorating at the moment with Putin's division of the world, where he's lining up all the authoritarians and the axis of authoritarianism. But if the UN were to focus on these organizations and mention them, then in turn, they would think they would mention the SDGs somehow, and the UN should also hire an advertising or PR firm as to how best to promote it in every different country. The poor countries, of course, know about the SDGs because it's their only hope. But the countries, so-called rich countries, they need to be considering it also, although there'll be backlash. Now, there's one point that our conversation so far has inspired me, is that Bill mentioned 2040 as the age when he thinks consciousness will somehow arrive by itself.
2030.
And I had mentioned 2040 also, but 2040 as the new UN agenda. The old UN agenda was the Agenda 2030 for the SDGs. And the UN is clearly at the moment realizing they aren't going to realize them. And there's a lot of problem when they're trying to accelerate things by doing more of the same things again. But when 2030 comes, there will be another set of goals. So let's anticipate that, and let's make and human security and sustainability, I think, ought to be the themes that the World Academy of Arts and Science, of which I'm a fellow, and they have 2 volumes of their journal on human security right now. David Harries, my colleague, is also a fellow of WAS and works in the Security and Sustainability Guide. He's very keen on human security concept. He's recently published a paper on this. He may be listening in and may say hi to us or offer a comment on this. But again, I think you begin thinking now about what I would call the 2040 agenda for the UN, which I think should focus on a new set of goals and also how to promote them. So
wonderful. Okay, so we do have a few comments here, and I think both of you talked a little bit about that, but it would be good to expand. So Alex is sharing, one can always cherry pick negative and positive statistics to illustrate a point, which tells quite a bit about the person doing the picking and next to nothing about the process in question. But once humans choose who they listen to, the story changes. We make the predictions they believe, and it actually happens. So we have this issue of bias. And then David actually is also offering different kinds of thoughts. So we are 8 billion plus human beings, each one of us with unique sets of biases, assumptions, and interests. So this issue of bias, we cherry pick what we want to believe, right? But then we're trying to achieve this global consciousness, but we live locally. So it's the local situations that determine the global outcome, or is it not?
Well, the life cycle of evolution that I plot, not cherry picking. It's historic data. You could find it anywhere on the internet. You could find it in published form. It's a science-based model. So I think it's a good guide to what we can expect. And as I showed, the acceleration from one stage to another is dramatic. 100 years for industrial age, 50 years for the service age, 20 years until the knowledge age. So I think that's pretty sound. I don't think that's bias. As to the point of consciousness has to be encouraged or promoted, absolutely. Who would agree otherwise? Absolutely. And I had a project in mind. It was a great project. I called it the Portal to Global Consciousness. I was planning to build a website that would allow anybody anywhere to experience global consciousness. I thought it was a great idea. It's still a great idea, but I couldn't get funding for it. We have to work hard to change consciousness. Right now, the consciousness of the United States is horrible. So that has to change. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I think it's likely to change with the trials that are underway or will soon be underway for Donald Trump. I think that could dispel that mass hysteria going on. The resolution of the war in Ukraine could change things. In fact, the Ukrainian war is a good example of global consciousness. When the attacks first came on Ukraine, there was an outpouring of opinion around the world supporting Ukraine. That was global consciousness. It was a small example of global consciousness that had occurred in support of Ukraine. And that's what's making it possible, really, for Ukraine to fight the Russians so effectively, that they have that support. So we need something like that on a larger scale. And it could just, attitudes could flip as climate change get worse in the next few years. It's bad now. People are terrified now. And if it gets just a little more severe, you could see attitudes flip.
Okay, we do have a different comment in our question here. So Samis is saying, given our medical research and technology could result in humanity being the first species to choose to evolve.
That's right.
Do we see many challenges in the future that could negative, but maybe that may catalyze our next step? So is evolution a normal process or a choice? Can we choose not to?
Well, it's complicated. It's bigger than us, first of all. It's bigger than individuals. It's beyond our capability, but yet we all contribute to it. So it's a kind of a paradox. We all contribute, but it's far bigger than us. It's going to go on regardless of any individual. And I think it's moving towards global maturity, the end of the life cycle. We're living beyond knowledge now. We're in this crazy period of post-factual nonsense. So we're in the early stage of an age of consciousness. Somehow we have to change attitudes. And I don't know how it's going to happen, but I think it's likely to change.
Yes, and Dr. Marion, I have a different question for you here and a comment.
I'd like to respond to the
Oh, sure. Go ahead, please.
Then a new question. But what would make us flip? Okay. First, in terms of the outpouring of support for Ukraine at the beginning of the war, as I think we now know, it's pretty much divided. That there's a lot of important countries that are sitting on the fence, and even within the U.S., the Republicans are waning in their support, and they don't want to. Some of them don't want to pay any more money. What will it take to make us flip? I go back again to Alfred Korzybski in 1921, who says in the wake of World War I, which was horrible, saying, well, humanity is coming to its senses. Well, no, unfortunately. Another book, which no one recognizes, but I think they ought to, is my dear departed friend, Warren Wager. Here, I happen to have his book here on A Short History of the Future, which is published by University of Chicago Press. It had 3 editions, 1989, 92, and 1994. But Warren just writes in a very extended scenarios about this. But what made humanity flip from the present age to a new global governance was a huge catastrophe in the year 2044. It was a huge war. Now, obviously, I'm not advocating this, but I think that this is, if not the most likely scenario, is certainly a probable scenario, and you have to think of it. It'll take a hell of a lot more than what we presently have to flip, because I don't see the attitudes are changing very, very much right now. So now what's the other question that Ram had?
Yes, so
there's lots of them.
Yes, there are several. So Stephen has a comment and a question here I would like you both to address. So social evolution has resulted in winners and losers. So if we were to achieve consciousness, shouldn't we all be winners, but we're still having winners and losers? How does that work?
Well, yeah, history has been madness. I mean, the fall of Rome, the Dark Ages, horrible things have happened, no question about it. But the overall trend is a life cycle of evolution, an S-curve. It's what's called, in systems theory, organized complexity. Organized complexity, lots of random behavior, but there's an organization to it. It's a very precise trend, and it has its direction. It's not random. It has a precise direction from agriculture to industry to services to knowledge to consciousness. That's very precise. You can't miss that direction. And the very fact that we're in an age of consciousness is meaningful. It's the last stage of social evolution in this cycle. All life cycles mature. A human being has to mature. And the trend is we're likely to mature. We're being driven to the point of maturity. As what's going to happen, who knows? I'm just pointing out these big historic trends that are clearly in this direction. And it's like think of the teenager who struggles, taking drugs and crime, whatever, until he finally endures enough pain, and he shapes up and says, I'm going to become a responsible adult. That's the kind of thing we have to, and I think it's probably going to be the increase in pain from climate. In 5 years, it's going to be really bad, and it's going to scare people, and I think that may be enough to change attitudes. But who knows? Anything could happen.
Wonderful, folks. This is just a taste of what is to come. Of course, this dialogue is going to continue. Unfortunately, not today because we are limited on time. But before we go, I have a few other questions for you guys, and maybe I'll start with you, Dr. Marion, securesustain.org. Can you tell us a little bit of what are you doing?
So I'll just go to the website and see. We're doing a lot of things and probably too much at once, but we have several indexes there where there you go. Towards collaboration, that's Friedrich's our manager in that, and he put that in. And again, the potential for collaboration is great, but you have to nudge people. You have to say, look, you have more than 150 organizations just concerned with climate change. Well, somehow maybe there can be an alliance to that. There's already 100 alliances or so. It's just amazing the number of organizations there that are all trying to do something and perhaps doing something and doing good, while at the same time things are getting worse. So it's that paradox of improvement and growing inadequacy, which we previously called muddling down. So the organizations are there. It's a constant struggle to keep it updated because there's a lot of new ones that are being created. Some of them are changing. They're publishing a lot of reports, which are free and online if you know about them. And I have a series of reviews on recent reports that I put out every quarterly, and that's difficult to keep up with that. So there's a lot of work to be done to promote the collaboration. Similar to evolution, it just won't happen on its own.
I have one final point I'd like to make, Romulo. I think
so. A little bit about your mission and your goals. Yes, go ahead.
Romulo, I have one final point I'd like to make.
Yes, I'm going to get to you in a moment. I'm just going to ask him just to clarify a little bit about his mission. Dr. Marion, can you share a little bit about your goals and your mission?
I might say, if you look under publications on our guide, we put out a series of the second item there, a series of quick looks, in which we cluster organizations so that you could see organizations that are concerned with certain topics. So can you click on there and see what we come up with? Okay, education for sustainability, short guide. We have that. Alternative energy. That's Michael Sales, who's also one of the principals there. Youth organizations. We have a quick guide to that. Keep rolling down. Okay, air pollution. That's from Iman, who's our assistant, who lives in Pakistan, and where the air pollution is really, really bad. So she's motivated. Global risk and challenges. That's Lorenzo did that. That was almost 2 years ago, so it may need updating. Keep moving down. Regional security. Lorenzo did that. Human security. All that. Youth groups. A quick look at leading organizations. Climate coalitions, migrants and refugees. That's certainly timely right now. Environmental peace building. That's very inspiring of how you can promote peace by also working in the environment. UN sustainability, keep going, climate security, cybersecurity, plastic pollution, Arctic warming. That's a real good one. Although it's
And water. I see that.
years
I'm in
ago.
Arizona, so we talk a
So,
lot
so
about
you get an idea what's going on in these
yes.
different categories, and even within these categories, these organizations don't know each other, and there's an opportunity from learning from each other and working together.
And of course, Dr. Halal would like to turn to you. And actually, there is, he's the author of the book, Beyond Knowledge, How Technology is Driving an Age of Consciousness, folks. We have a separate interview with Dr. Halal that is also posted on wfsf.org. I see a few questions here. So all the links to those websites, they're wonderful resources. They'll be published in the comment sections of this video. Dr. Halal, please.
Yeah, I want to make one final point about how this could, these threats could possibly be addressed from an unsuspecting source. It's something that could surprise us as a way to change consciousness. It's not well known that 90% of corporations today practice what's called ESG, environment, social, and governance. That is the beginning of a very crucial trend away from the profit motive as the sole mission of business into what people are calling stakeholder capitalism, a variety of names. I published a piece in Fortune recently called The Democratic Enterprise. This is ideally where this could go, where all of these stakeholders, the investors, workers, customers, the public, and so forth, are considered partners in an enterprise that is collaborative, where the executives get them to work together to solve strategic problems that create added value for everybody. Everybody benefits. It no longer capitalism, democratic enterprise. They are getting a lot of pushback from ESG. People are accusing them of being woke. They are not yielding to that pressure. They are holding steadfast because they know the problems are so severe that government alone cannot solve them, and they have to do something about them. They are committed to this. I think they could evolve in time. In our forecast is this decade, 70% probability. This is my TechCast forecast. 70% probability that we will see a democratic enterprise enter mainstream in this decade. I think that's a pretty decent forecast. So we could be surprised to see that corporations, the most reviled institution around, lead us towards a solution to this dilemma.
Speaking of reviled institutions, the folks at Davos, the World Economic Forum, are often reviled by many because that's where the rich assemble. But they put out some very good stuff, including their annual risk report, which I recommend. That they have a listing of 32 risks, which are ranked. 32 ranked risks for the next 2 years and the next 10 years, and it's all there online. And I'm sure that the more woke corporations are taking a look at that, and those are not yet woke, they ought to look at it.
Wonderful. And I would like to ask Victor to tell a little bit of what he's working on, Alternative Planetary Futures Institute.
Oh, thank you very much. Of course, we are also very much focused on this idea of global consciousness, but not only limited to the framework by Dr. Halal, but also trying to do a sort of triangulation to collect all the different sources that are talking about this awakening or this kind of new phase or new step in humanity's consciousness. And interestingly, in our reports, you can see that at the bottom of the page, there is a report which is called the Future Ages of Collective Awakening, based on a very well-known macro history framework by the French futurist Thierry Gaudin, who says that every 900 years there is a revolution in human consciousness or spirit or mind. And I highly recommend to look at that report, because it actually fits together with what Dr. Halal has mentioned today. But let me just point out that after participating in this dialogue between these great futurists, I would say that both of them are actually sharing a very important point. Although in the beginning, you and me, Ram, were planning for this show, I refused to frame this as a debate between pessimists and optimists, or even between idealists or realists, but simply said that we need to frame it like contrasting outlooks or contrasting viewpoints about the alternative futures. But interestingly, I learned today that Dr. Marion is actually saying that global consciousness is not going to happen automatically. It needs some big step in taking the initiative. And in particular, he is also talking exactly about the main theme by Dr. Halal, which is a call for collaboration. In the website that Dr. Marion showed us today, he is basically trying to fight against this fragmentation of different organizations and the communities of sustainability researchers and activists by creating a platform, a portal for all the sustainability community to know about each other, to collaborate with each other, which is basically the same thing that Dr. Halal is doing by looking at the establishment of a portal of global consciousness. You see that the theme of collaboration, that the theme of cooperation, and the somehow returning of the female deities' values, as exemplified by the icon of a female picture on the back, on the cover of the book by Dr. Halal, Beyond Knowledge, is actually very important. It represents a shift in human values from more patriarchal to somehow matriarchal. And it is very important that we collaborate, we cooperate, and somehow find a good balance between competition, which is of course very good, and the absence of this international and global collaboration.
Bye. I'm having lunch.
Wonderful. And then this, of course, this conversation continues. I would like to welcome you to wfsf.org, World Future Studies Federation. Of
and
course,
we have a conference in Paris very soon.
Yes, we're going to get there.
50th anniversary.
It is the 50th anniversary. It's coming soon. So please stay tuned. We're going to have more shows and more discussions about the 50th anniversary. There's lots of work going on, lots of preparation. Those two gentlemen certainly are going to be there and presenting their views and perspectives, and many others. So please stay tuned. Go back and visit WFSF.org. And of course, if you go under communications and you see WFSF and yours truly, you can find all of the shows we have done together. And I mentioned to you, here's Dr. Halal's interview about his book. So that and much more on WFSF.org. So folks, it has been a wonderful day. Has been a wonderful exchange. Dr. Marion, Dr. Halal, thank you so much. It's time for us to start thanking you, our wonderful audience, for being here with us today. It was a great exchange. There are many more comments and questions in here. Please stay tuned to this thread, and I'm going to add all of those resources and internet addresses to the comment sections of this video, so you can come back and look at them. Again, thank you so very much for your being here with us today. I hope you have enjoyed this exchange and you come back for more. Thank you so very much, and I'll see you in yet another edition of In Focus from WFSF.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Hey, thank you.